true colors. They are not red, white, and blue. Not anymore. My familiarity with Maher goes back to my formative years, when my father always watched the snooze-y Sunday morning public affairs shows, and then Maher's Politically Correct came along and made listening to boring old people chatter about politics entertaining. I was creeped out by his constant references to all the time he spent at the Playboy mansion. But okay, that was his schtick. Subscribe for free to receive new posts and support my work. Note: subscribers are emailed new posts, followers are not. From the beginning, Maher not only pacified but befriended, enriched, and to a great degree misrepresented some of the most noxious people whose mouths move for a living. And Coulter was on Politically Correct all the time. She was his friend, maybe his girlfriend. She is better than average at throwing out critical daggers with quick wit, if not humor, and she's vulnerable. When she's insulted, you can see her wince. When I was in my early 20s, Maher's endorsement of Coulter and his advertisement of her books made me curious enough to subscribe to her online newsletter. I immediately regretted this mistake, as her pre-Thanksgiving message was not one of thanks but of condemning all Muslim people and, if I am remembering correctly, demanding that all Islamic people be rounded up and deported. I unsubscribed immediately because I thought of Nazis immediately. The uncensored version of Coulter delivered by her newsletter was appalling, and it was very little like the version who Bill Maher helped to make famous back in the 90s and 2000s. Before I dig into Bill Maher's decision to walk through the gates of hell, it's important to recognize something. Bill Maher is not the same man he used to play on TV, and despite how conservative media refer to him, he's a libertarian. He has taken in recent years to calling himself a classical liberal. That's another term for libertarian. According to this source, for classical liberals, CLs, and libertarians, liberty is central. It may be summarized as person, property, and consent, the individual's dominion that others are presumptively not to mess with. We'll come back to that. What makes people think Bill Maher is liberal, progressive, Democrat adjacent? Primarily, he has always argued for the legalization of marijuana and some other drugs. He did this back in the 90s when it was regarded as a radical notion. Today, it is not even a progressive notion. It's a profitable enterprise, and Republican former Speaker of the House John Boehner opened his own cannabis farm. Maher's motivations are personal. He's evidently addicted to marijuana, although he insists he is not because, he says, he doesn't have to smoke it constantly, he just chooses to smoke it constantly. He asserts this often on his weekly podcast, in which he smokes marijuana and drinks cocktails. Early on, he spoke often and strongly about environmental stewardship. He has given up that cause almost entirely, with the exception of an entirely self-interested rant about California's solar energy regulations several years ago that was 95% motivated by Republican-style deregulation and 5% environmental sustainability. He proselytizes atheism with the passion of a religious devotee. But this is actually a Trojan horse, as his extreme anti-Islamic perspective makes US-style Christianity his de facto religious preference. He's on the board of PETA. Here's a video on PETA's website of a young Bill Maher reading a scripted comment about cruelty to animals. Let's pause here because, first of all, this is about the extent of Maher's progressive points of view. He doesn't hate gay or black people, but he is entirely ambivalent to whether or not they have any rights or are treated justly under law because this does not affect his life in any way. That's about it. Bill Maher has always supported the causes that affect his life and that he adopted in his more hippie-ish youth. At best, he is ambivalent to all others. If entire groups of people are politically and legally oppressed, abused, and treated unjustly, that's not his problem if it's not his problem. He doesn't care, and he's there to tell his fans that they don't need to care, either, as long as they think marijuana jokes are hilarious. Okay, let's cut to today. Maher calls himself a classical liberal, a political philosophy sect that supposedly centers itself on freedom. Maher just met with Donald Trump as Trump was actively sending innocent migrants and US citizens alike to what can be fairly described as a concentration camp in a foreign country. I'm certain I've heard Maher say you don't negotiate with terrorists. Well, when Maher had dinner with Trump, he wasn't negotiating, he was capitulating. He doesn't want to hear it. In keeping with his own Trump-like narcissistic personality, Maher cannot and will not bear any criticism of him, regardless of the success he found not really in comedy but in political commentary and criticism. On last Saturday's Real Time with Bill Maher, Maher gave a defiant rant directly to you, the audience, staring into the camera and sniping sentence after scripted sentence about why he was right to dine with Donald Trump and why you are wrong for judging him harshly for it. Maher's list of Trump's virtues were many. He's not crazy. He only pretends to be crazy. He has a great sense of humor. Tip: if you want to make a narcissist think you have a great sense of humor, pretend to laugh at every funny thing they say. Trump autographed a list of Trump's insults of Maher, proving this sense of humor. Maher called Vladimir Putin Trump's boyfriend and Trump laughed, proving Trump's immense hilarity. He has a beautiful home, according to Maher, that home being the White House. In sum, Maher told us, Trump really is not that bad a guy. To be fair, Maher sneered several times during his compliment fest that he understands that Trump being nice to him doesn't make up for him not being nice to everyone. So there's that. Maher did not mention Trump's original coup attempt, which Maher has banked for a decade on having predicted would happen, and which Maher has said is the worst thing that has ever happened in the United States. Trump's countless crimes, including felonies, and including at least 25 allegations of violent sexual assault against women and girls, for one of which he was found liable by a jury. Trump's spectacularly vicious attempt to humiliate Volodymyr Zelensky on live television. Maher didn't mention this, but he did tell us that he made a joke at Zelensky's expense to Trump and Trump enjoyed it. Quick note that upwards of 125,000 Ukrainian people have been murdered by Putin's invasion and Zelensky has nobly held his ground against the invading forces. But by all means, Mr. Maher, mock him to ingratiate yourself to the Führer. Any of the countless complaints Maher has made of Trump over the years. Maher is a convert. I have to ask, can a man still claim to be an atheist after he sells his soul to Satan and brags about it on television? What happened to Bill Maher? He has never really seemed like a stand-up guy aside from his comedy career, but he has presented himself as righteous and certainly not fascist until now. I can think of only 3 possible explanations, and none is mutually exclusive. Trump was summoned to the White House, and on his Club Random podcast, he recently told the other woman who holds a Coulter-like position in his career, the New York Times' Maureen Dowd, that he is honored to be invited to the White House regardless of who the president is. He spoke of his life story, from his humble roots, not mentioning his Ivy League education, to HBO to the White House. Maher's ego was pleased to be invited. Dowd, as always, cooed and fawned her way through the interview. Her schoolgirl flirtations are so effective I was shocked to realize she is 73 years old. Like Trump's ego, Maher's ego will not be denied, and women like Maureen Dowd and Coulter know how to harmonize with it. So does Donald Trump. His father was a narcissist, giving Donald a lifetime of practice to perfect his performed tolerance of someone with his same personality type. It is not at all unreasonable to question whether Maher was intimidated and under threat of extreme punishment from his own federal government, whether his courage fled so that he and those he cares about can continue to live as arguably free citizens. This is not unreasonable to question because part of Trump's campaign was a vow to get retribution against all of his critics, and Maher is one of his public critics, and Trump has made good on his threats. Now that Trump is running concentration camps, people like Bill Maher have real reason, not just good reason, to cower and bow down, even when it means they convert their own television show into a song and dance performance dedicated to Dear Leader, which Bill Maher did last Friday night. Bill Maher and Donald Trump have demonstrably similar personality profiles, which some could call personality disorders. Maher has mocked Donald Trump for being so offended by Barack Obama's jokes about him, during a White House press corps dinner defined by roasting those in the audience, that it provoked Trump to run for president and seek revenge on Barack Obama and all black Americans. Maher has mocked Donald Trump for being so embarrassingly insecure that he surrounds himself with a cabinet of yes men who must, one by one, compliment Trump during cabinet meetings. Maher, for his part, famously and distractingly boos his audience when they don't laugh loudly enough at his jokes. He doesn't do this as a kind of schtick. He often has been visibly offended by his audience's lack of gratuitous laughter to the point he jeers them and then makes references to their failure to have laughed at his opening monologue throughout the duration of his shows. He reportedly does this during live stand-up performances, as well. I have found his HBO Max show difficult to watch for years not only because of his opinions, which are becoming increasingly sympathetic to Donald Trump's hate-based agenda, but also because of the sweetening of the laugh track, with several prominent, obviously performed, laughs from the same voices mixed into the audio at high levels. Bill Maher depends on the acceptance and adoration of his audiences in exactly the same way Donald Trump does. When he doesn't get the adoration he expects, he goes borderline mommy dearest, seething at the people from whom he demands respect. His entire late-night career involves criticizing public personalities, but he absolutely does not tolerate being criticized, and this was demonstrated last Friday night. After he lavished Donald Trump with compliments, making his conversion to Fox News mega crusader entirely inevitable and surely terrifying some of his courage-lacking fans into falling in line with Trump as he did, Maher was criticized by Washington Post columnist Josh Rogin for having fallen victim to Donald Trump's manipulations. Maher was visibly livid. Rogin, in an apparent attempt to preempt Maher's ego from melting down, "Is this how Washington Post staffers currently deal with Bezos?" gratuitously reassured Maher that everyone loves him before breaking the news to Maher that his long-winded assertion that Trump is a cool guy made Maher look like a fool. Behold the fallout. Maher's role on his show typically is to facilitate conversation. In this case, he couldn't take the same kind of criticism he has made a living doling out, and he shut down the hard truth before it could penetrate his brain. Maher confirmed years ago, as he has passively participated in anti-transgender and other so-called anti-woke hatred, that he is not in fact a freedom-loving liberal but a grumpy, generally bitter old man who uses his influential platform to argue for what's good for him and against what's good for people whose lives have nothing to do with his. But that was still a far cry from becoming a full-on Donald Trump propagandist. Bill Maher waited for Trump to become a full-on Nazi before jumping onto the bandwagon. Subscribe for free to receive new posts and support my work.